Rushing to work, I saw my husband WHO was supposed to be home caring for our sick child. My heart sank as I decided to follow him. And I was nearly frozen by what I saw. Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Let's tear into today's tale. I was running late for class, clutching my lesson plan and a half-empty cup of coffee when I stopped dead in my tracks. Across the street, weaving quickly through the crowd, was Adrian, my husband. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near downtown this morning. He was supposed to be at home caring for Eli, our 3-year-old son, who had woken up at dawn with a fever hot enough to make me panic. Before I left, Adrian had kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. I'll work from home today, he said. Go cover that class. You're already short-staffed. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was the dependable one, the steady one. And yet there he was, walking quickly, his eyes scanning the street like he didn't want to be seen. I almost convinced myself it wasn't him. Maybe it was someone who just looked like him from behind. But then he reached up and adjusted his watch the way Adrian always did, twisting it twice on his wrist. That little habit, the one I'd seen 1,000 times, knocked the air out of my lungs. A memory surfaced when I had tried to ignore Samantha's voice 2 weeks ago, calm but hesitant. Claire, I'm probably overreacting, but I think I saw Adrian downtown. He was at a cafe with a blonde woman. They looked comfortable. I'd laughed too quickly. You must have been mistaken. Adrian doesn't even like coffee shops. Samantha had let it go. But I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. Then life got busy. School, the kids, Adrian's late-night work calls. And I convinced myself it didn't matter. He was just stressed and I needed to trust him. But now, seeing him like this, rushing through the city when he should have been home with our sick son, my heart began to pound, heavy and uneven. I checked the time. My next class started in 15 minutes, but my body refused to move toward the school. Instead, I slipped behind a group of pedestrians and followed him. Each step felt like a betrayal of the trust we had built over the years. But how could I not? My mind was already running through 1,000 scenarios. Who was he meeting? Why was he dressed like that? Adrian was a man of habits. Pressed shirts, neat shoes, always polished. Today, he wore a cheap orange polo shirt and off-brand sneakers I'd never seen before. My throat tightened. Was he meeting her? He crossed into a sleek cafe with floor-to-ceiling windows and disappeared inside. Through the glass, I saw her immediately, a blonde woman, stylish, poised, smiling at him like he was the only person in the world. And Adrian smiled back. Something inside me cracked. My hands shook as I pushed the door open and slipped into a corner booth far enough away not to be noticed, but close enough to watch. For 10 long minutes, I sat there, my mind a whirlwind of anger, fear, and disbelief. Their conversation was animated, their expressions too familiar for strangers. Then he stood, said something to her I couldn't hear, and headed toward the patio smoking area. One detail snapped me out of my spiral. Adrian hated cigarettes. He wouldn't even stand near smokers at outdoor events. Why would he go there? I stood up, gripping my bag, my pulse pounding so loudly it felt like everyone in the cafe could hear it. Before I could think twice, I was outside calling his name, Adrian. The man turned. For one terrifying second, I thought it was him. The same jawline, the same eyes, the same startled expression. But then I saw the differences. A faint scar along his left temple, a tattoo curling out from under his sleeve. Adrian didn't have a scar. He didn't have tattoos. Hi, the man said, confusion flickering across his face. His voice was lower, rougher than Adrian's. Do I know you? I froze, my breath catching in my throat. You look exactly like. A small, nervous smile tugged at his lips. You must be Claire Brooks, he said, like he'd been expecting me all along. My stomach lurched. How do you know my name? The blonde woman from the cafe stepped outside, her expression calm but cautious. It's okay, Lucas, she said gently, placing a hand on his arm. She deserves to know. Lucas, not Adrian. The fear of betrayal twisted into something far stranger. Confusion, disbelief, and the sinking realization that whatever story I thought I was living was about to change completely. People often assume strength is something you're born with, like eye color or a knack for math. I used to think so, too. Until life yanked the floor out from under me and left me standing on nothing but willpower. I was 20 when I lost both of my parents. They were driving to Lake Tahoe for their annual autumn hiking trip, a tradition they'd kept since before I was born. I was in my college dorm cramming for finals when my phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to a sheriff, calm and carefully rehearsed, as if he'd made too many calls like this before. A rock slide had hit the trail they were on. They didn't survive. I remember sitting on the edge of my narrow dorm bed, the phone slipping from my hands as though it were made of ice. One moment I had parents planning to send me photos of fall leaves, and the next I had nothing. Grandma took me in after that, though she wasn't exactly the warm cookie baking type. She was strict, frugal, hardened by life in a way that made her both intimidating and safe. She gave me structure at a time when my world had none, and I'll always be grateful for that. But 2 years later, I lost her, too. Suddenly, quietly, to a heart attack in her sleep. That was the first time I realized you can't rely on anyone staying forever. Maybe that's why I clung to Mark when I met him. He was funny, charming, and had this easy grin that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. For a girl who just buried half her family, his attention felt like oxygen. 6 months later, I was staring at a pregnancy test, my hands trembling so badly, I nearly dropped it. 2 pink lines. When I told Mark, he didn't yell or cry. He just stared at me, eyes flat, jaw working like he was chewing on the words. I am not ready to be a dad, he said finally. You should, take care of it. I couldn't. No matter how scared I was, I couldn't do it. That little life inside me was all I had left of family. Mark left 2 days later, and that was the last I ever saw of him. I was 22, alone and pregnant. But something inside me hardened then. If no one else was going to show up for me, I would show up for myself. The months that followed were brutal. I worked 2 part-time jobs while finishing my degree, my feet swelling from standing too long, my back aching, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep. There were nights I ate instant noodles so I could afford prenatal vitamins and mornings when I dragged myself to class after barely 3 hours of rest. When Era was born, tiny and perfect, I wept so hard the nurse had to check if I was okay. I was better than okay, actually, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't completely alone. But single motherhood isn't romantic, no matter what movies try to tell you. There's no soft focus montage of cuddles and giggles without the reality of bills stacking up, of rocking a colicky baby at 3 a.m. with tears running down your own face because you're just so tired. Still, I fought through it. I learned to budget every dollar to cook meals from scratch, to fix leaky faucets by watching online tutorials. I made sacrifices I never thought I could make, all for the sake of the little girl who clutched my finger with her tiny hand and made everything else feel small by comparison. By the time I earned my teaching license and landed my first full-time job, I felt invincible. I'd built a life from scratch, 1 penny and 1 sleepless night at a time. I told myself I didn't need anyone else. Certainly not another man. Love, at least the romantic kind, was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not emotionally, not financially. For years, it was just me and Era against the world. And I convinced myself I liked it that way. No one to disappoint me, no one to leave. And maybe I would have kept it that way forever if Adrian hadn't walked into our lives. I met Adrian on one of those ordinary days you never expect to remember. Era and I had stopped at a small bookstore after school because she'd begged me for a new sketch pad. She was obsessed with drawing. Our apartment walls were covered with her artwork taped up like an evolving gallery. I was crouching to tie her shoelace when a voice behind me said, "Excuse me, is this yours?" I turned to see a tall man holding Ariel's pink backpack. He had warm brown eyes and an easy smile that felt safe somehow. "She dropped it near the art books," he said, asterisk that was Adrian Brooks, an engineer who worked for a real estate development company. We ended up chatting while Era browsed through markers and pencils. He asked about her drawings, and when she proudly showed him her sketch of a tree, he crouched down and said, "You're an artist, huh? That's pretty cool." I hadn't seen many men talk to kids like that, not with fake interest, but with real warmth. It startled me a little. Over the next few weeks, we ran into each other a couple more times, then exchanged numbers. I told him I was a single mom early on, expecting the usual pause or polite nod before things faded. But Adrian didn't flinch. He just smiled and said, "Then I'm lucky I get to meet two amazing people instead of one." Dating him was easy in a way I didn't know dating could be. He showed up for various school events, cooked us dinner after long days, and never once made me feel like my life was too complicated. He respected my boundaries, but slowly earned my trust, something I hadn't given anyone in years. 2 years later, he proposed in the simplest way possible. Just the three of us sitting by the river on a breezy spring day. A small picnic spread out on a blanket. He pulled a little box from his pocket and asked, "Can we make this official?" Era squealed and shouted yes, before I even opened my mouth. I was crying too hard to answer properly, so I just nodded. Our wedding was small. Close friends, a few colleagues, and family from his adoptive parents' side. I wore a simple cream dress. Era walked me down the aisle, scattering petals, and Adrian looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Afterward, we bought a modest house on the outskirts of Sacramento. It wasn't huge, but it had a backyard, and Era loved that more than anything. A few years later, we welcomed twin boys, Eli and Evan. Life got louder, messier, but also fuller than I'd ever imagined possible. I'd watch Adrian playing with all three kids. Era perched on his shoulders while he carried the twins in each arm. And I'd think, this is it. This is the life I fought for. For the first time in my adult life, I trusted someone completely. I let myself believe the years of loneliness and heartbreak were behind me. I believed we were unshakable. And for a while, it really felt that way until little cracks began to show. For a long time, I believed nothing could shake us. Life wasn't perfect. Whose is, but it was steady. Adrian was dependable, the kind of man who double-seed locks at night and kissed me goodbye every morning. We had a rhythm when I thought nothing could break. But then small things started to change. At first, it was just his schedule. He'd take phone calls in the garage, speaking quietly so I couldn't hear. He started leaving earlier than usual for site inspections, even on weekends, which his company rarely required. He bought a few new clothes, cheap sneakers, an orange polo shirt, a baseball cap, and tucked them into the corner of our closet, separate from his usual ironed shirts and polished shoes. I wanted to believe it was stress, or maybe a midlife wardrobe experiment. Everyone has phases, right? But the unease wouldn't go away, especially after what Samantha said. Samantha had been my best friend since college. Blunt in the way only real friends can be. 2 weeks earlier, she'd mentioned casually, "I think I saw Adrian downtown. He was at a cafe with a blonde woman. They looked comfortable." I laughed too. Quickly, waved it off. "You must have been mistaken. Adrian hates coffee shops." Samantha gave me that look. Half apology, half warning, but let it go. I didn't though. Her words lingered like a splinter under the skin. Still, I told myself to trust him. He was Adrian, the man who made pancakes with smiley faces for the kids, who held me when my nightmares about losing my parents crept back. He wouldn't hurt me. Then came this morning. Eli woke up flushed and lethargic, clinging to my shirt. I panicked, ready to call in sick, but Adrian kissed my forehead and said, "I'll work from home. Take care of him. Go cover that class. You're already short-staffed." It sounded so reasonable, so thoughtful. I kissed them both and left, feeling grateful for him, until I saw him in the middle of downtown, walking fast, head down, dressed in those cheap sneakers and that orange polo. My heart dropped like a stone. I could have driven on, pretended I never saw him, but Samantha's voice came back sharp and clear. They looked comfortable. So, I parked, grabbed my bag, and followed him on foot. Every step felt wrong, like I was betraying the trust we'd built, but I couldn't stop. Not until I knew. He moved quickly through the crowd, then turned into a sleek cafe with tall windows. And that's when I saw her, the blonde woman, sitting by the window, smiling as he approached. She reached out to touch his arm, and he didn't pull away. I felt my stomach knot, my breath coming in sharp bursts. I slipped inside, sliding into a corner booth where I could watch unnoticed. For 10 minutes, I sat frozen, my coffee cooling in my hands, watching them talk like old friends or more. Then he stood, said something I couldn't hear, and walked toward the patio smoking area. One detail cut through my haze of fear. Adrian didn't smoke. He hated cigarettes. Couldn't even stand near someone who did. Why would he go out there? I grabbed my bag and followed, my pulse pounding in my ears. Before I could think, I heard my own voice calling out, "Adrian." The man turned, and that's when I realized this wasn't Adrian. He turned toward me, and for a moment, my brain refused to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. The resemblance was uncanny. The same jawline, the same blue-gray eyes, even the way he tilted his head when surprised. For one terrifying second, I thought Adrian had changed somehow, like I was looking at a distorted version of my husband. But then I saw it. A faint scar curved along his left temple, something Adrian didn't have. A dark tattoo peeked out from under his sleeve. Adrian hated tattoos. And when he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher, carrying an edge I had never heard before. Hi, he said, brows knitting together. "Do I know you?" I froze, my breath caught in my throat. You look exactly like," my words trailed off as I stared at him, unable to finish. A small sheepish smile tugged at his lips. "You must be Claire Brooks," he said, as if confirming something he'd already guessed. My pulse quickened. "How do you know my name?" Before he could answer, the blonde woman from the cafe stepped outside. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were alert, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "It's okay, Lucas," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "She deserves to know." "Lucas?" The man nodded once, still looking at me cautiously. "I'm not your husband," he said gently. "My name is Lucas Harris, and I think your husband is my twin brother." I blinked, the words sliding right past comprehension. Twin brother. That couldn't be true. Adrian had told me 1,000 times he was an only child raised by 2 loving parents who doted on him. Every story he'd ever shared, from building model planes with his dad to fishing trips with his mom, painted the picture of a small, tight-knit family with no siblings in sight. That's impossible," I whispered, shaking my head. "Adrian doesn't have a brother." Lucas's jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. "He might think that, but it's not true. I grew up in Nevada, bounced around foster homes, then got adopted by a couple who tried, but life was never easy. When they passed, I found my birth certificate. There was a note, twin and twin B, that's when I started looking." The blonde woman stepped forward, extending her hand. "Lauren Reed. I'm a private investigator. Lucas hired me to help track his family. Everything points to your husband, Adrian Brooks, as Lucas's biological twin. I took a step back, my head spinning. You are telling me you've been following my husband? Meeting him like this in secret without telling me? Lucas shook his head quickly. No, I've never met him. I tried contacting him a few weeks ago, but he didn't respond today. I just wanted to see him in person to know he's real. I wasn't expecting to run into you. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and something inside me hesitated. This wasn't the voice of a con artist or someone trying to ruin my life. This was someone carrying decades of loneliness, hoping for connection. Lauren pulled a folder from her bag, holding it out to me. Everything's here. Adoption decrees, partial DNA records, photographs of hospital tags. We double-checked before coming here. There's no mistake. Your husband has a twin brother. I stared at the folder, but didn't take it. My hands were shaking too much to trust myself, not to drop it. Adrian never mentioned anything like this. He told me he was an only child. Lucas sighed, his shoulders slumping. Then maybe he doesn't know either. Maybe his adoptive parents never told him. That's why I'm here to see him. To finally get answers. For a moment, none of us spoke. The city. Noise blurred into a dull hum like the world had stepped aside to give me room to process. This morning I had been ready to confront an affair, to watch my marriage crumble right in front of me. Instead, I was staring at a man who looked exactly like my husband, holding a truth so bizarre it felt like fiction. Lucas's expression softened. Further. I'm not asking for much, Claire. I don't want to take anything from your family. I just want to meet him to know where I come from. I've spent 35 years wondering if I belonged anywhere. And now, finally, I know I do. At least I hope. I do. I finally exhaled, my body trembling. I need to talk to Adrian. Lucas nodded, stepping back respectfully. I'll be around. I'm not leaving town until I meet him. Tell him I'm here, please. Lauren offered me a small empathetic smile before gently guiding Lucas back toward the cafe. He glanced over his shoulder once almost shyly before disappearing inside. I stood there for a moment longer, the adrenaline ebbing into confusion and disbelief. That fear of betrayal that had fueled every step I had taken to get here was gone, replaced by something heavier and more complicated. Uncertainty about everything I thought I knew. Because it turned out my husband hadn't been lying about a secret lover, but he might have been living a life built on a secret he didn't even know existed. I didn't sleep much that night. Even when the house was quiet and Adrian's breathing was steady beside me, my mind refused to shut down. The image of Lucas's face, so much like Adrian's, yet different in ways I couldn't explain, kept flashing through my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that scar, that tattoo, and the weight in his voice when he said, "I think your husband is my twin brother." By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted Lucas, asking to meet without Adrian. I told myself I needed to hear more before confronting my husband with something that could turn his life upside down. Lucas arrived at the small park near our neighborhood early. He sat on a bench, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched like someone who'd carried too much for too long. "You came," he said quietly when I approached. "I wasn't sure you would." I sat down, leaving a respectful distance between us. "I almost didn't. Yesterday was a lot." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Welcome to my life." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Lucas nodded slowly. "I grew up in Nevada. My adoptive parents were good people at heart, but they struggled. Money was always tight. Arguments were common, and sometimes. They just couldn't handle me. I bounced in and out of foster homes a few times when things got bad." His eyes stayed on the ground as he spoke, voice flat like he'd rehearsed these memories so often they lost their sting. I always knew I was adopted. They told me when I was 7, but there weren't many details. Closed adoption, no names, no history. He paused, then added, when they passed last year, I found an old envelope with my birth certificate. That's when I saw it. Under birth order, it said twin B. It didn't make sense at first. A twin where? Why hadn't anyone ever told me? The sadness in his voice made me ache. So, you started looking?
Yeah.
I scraped together what I could, paid for DNA testing, and that's when I met Lauren. He glanced toward the cafe where we'd first crossed paths. Though, she wasn't there this time. She's a private investigator, specializes in missing relatives. She traced hospital records, adoption files, everything pointed to one man, Adrian Brooks. The dates matched, the birthplace matched, even the physical features. The DNA, well, it's as close to identical as it gets without testing him directly. He finally looked at me then, eyes raw and searching. I'm not making this up, Claire. I am not here to mess with your family or scam anyone. I've spent 35 years wondering why I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And now I know why. Because the person I was supposed to grow up with, my brother, was out there the whole time living a completely different life. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Adrian never said anything about having a brother. He told me he was an only child, adopted, but no mention of siblings. Lucas nodded. That's what I expected. Closed adoptions, separate families. It happens more than people realize. Maybe his parents never told him. Maybe they didn't even know. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. Look, I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm not asking for money or a place to stay. I just want to look him in the eye and know he's real. To know that even though we were separated, there's still a piece of family out there for me. His words hung in the air, heavy and honest. I could see the truth of it in the way his shoulders sagged and the exhaustion etched into his face. I don't hate you, I said softly. This is a lot. You have to understand. I thought I was catching my husband cheating yesterday. Now I'm standing here talking to a man who might be his twin brother. That's not something you process overnight. He nodded. I get it. Believe me, I've been trying to process it for months. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been eating at me. Why now? Why look after all these years? Lucas's jaw tightened. Because I don't have anyone left. My parents are gone. No kids, no siblings, at least, I thought. Then I found out about Adrian, and it felt like maybe I wasn't as alone as I believed. For the first time, I saw his eyes shine, not with manipulation, but with raw, aching hope. I'll talk to him, I said finally. But you need to give me time. This isn't something I can just drop on him without warning. Lucas's shoulders relaxed a fraction. That's all I'm asking, time. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching Adrian read to Eli, who was snuggled under his blanket. He looked so peaceful, so completely unaware of the storm about to hit. How do you tell someone their entire identity might be based on a secret they never even knew existed? I realized something then. This wasn't about betrayal between husband and wife. It was about identity, blood, and the kind of secrets that shape entire lives without anyone realizing it. I took a deep breath, knowing what I had to do next. That night, I didn't wait. I couldn't. Adrian was sitting on the couch, gently rocking Eli, who'd finally fallen asleep after another dose of medicine, while Evan stacked blocks in the corner. The soft glow from the living room lamp made everything look painfully normal, like we were just another happy family ending a long day. But my heart was hammering as I whispered, "We need to talk." He looked up immediately, concern flashing in his eyes. What's wrong? Is Eli worse? No, it's not about that. I gestured toward the hallway. Can we talk in the kitchen? He nodded, handing Eli the soft toy bear he always slept with before laying him on the couch. Once we were in the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, clutching it for support. "Do you know someone named Lucas Harris?" The reaction was instant. Adrian froze, his expression shifting from confusion to something heavier. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might deny everything. Instead, he sank into a chair, rubbing his face with both hands. "You met him?" "Yes." My voice trembled slightly, but I kept going. "He looks exactly like you, Adrian. And he says you're twins." Adrian closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." "You didn't know how?" My voice cracked, sharper than I intended. "Adrian, how do you not know how to say something like that? I thought you were cheating on me." His eyes snapped open, pained. "Cheating, Claire? No. God. No. Is that why you followed me?" I swallowed hard. "Yes. I thought you were hiding something, and you were." He ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly defeated. "I didn't know, Claire. Not until recently. When I turned 18, my parents told me I was adopted. It was a closed adoption. No information, no family history. I didn't push it because I didn't want to hurt them. They gave me everything. Love, stability, a home. I thought, what good would digging up the past do?" He paused, voice quieter now. "A few weeks ago, I got an email from a private investigator, Lauren Reed. She said someone was looking for me, someone who might be related. I thought it was a scam at first, but then she sent adoption records and a photo of him. Lucas, my twin." I stared, processing. "So, you've known for weeks and didn't tell me?" "I didn't know how to bring it up," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I was trying to wrap my head around it first. Claire, all my life I believed I was an only child. Now I have a twin brother who grew up in an entirely different world, one I can't even imagine. It's like finding out half of your life was written by someone else." I sat down across from him, my anger cooling into something else. Confusion, empathy, maybe even guilt for jumping to the worst conclusion. "So you didn't know about him at all?" "No," he said firmly. "I had no idea. If I had, I would have looked for him sooner. God, he grew up without me and I had everything. Parents who loved me, a good home, a chance at college." While he was bouncing from foster homes, his eyes glistened and he shook his head. "I feel like I stole something that was supposed to be his, too." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "You didn't steal anything, Adrian. You were a baby. None of this was your choice." He squeezed my hand back, his eyes searching mine. "I want to meet him. Really meet him. I just didn't want to spring it on you without warning." I let out a shaky breath, feeling tension drain from my shoulders. "He's not going anywhere, Adrian. And neither am I. But we're doing this together. No more secrets, no more surprises. Okay." He nodded quickly. "Okay. Together." And for the first time since that morning, I felt like I could breathe again. 2 days later, I was rearranging chairs around our dining table. A simple act that felt strangely monumental. Era hummed while setting out glasses, her excitement bubbling over even though she only knew we were having guests. Adrian stood near the window, pulling the curtains back every few seconds like he expected someone to vanish if he blinked. When the doorbell rang, he froze for half a breath, then exhaled slowly and opened it. Lucas stood there, shoulders tense, clutching a paper bag like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. He hesitated on the doorstep before saying quietly, "Hi, brother." For a moment, no one moved. Then, Adrian stepped forward and hugged him. It was awkward. Two men who looked alike, but carried entirely different histories colliding in one moment. But it was real. Inside, the kids stared like they were seeing double. Two daddies. Eli squealed, making everyone laugh and instantly breaking the tension. Not exactly, Lucas said, crouching to their level with a shy smile. Just an uncle who looks funny. Over dinner, the conversation wavered between stiff small talk and raw honesty. Lucas shared stories about growing up, moving from one house to another, never fully unpacking because he knew he might have to leave again. There was humor in his voice at times, but sadness lingered beneath every laugh. I always wondered if I had someone out there who looked like me, he said, glancing at Adrian. Turns out. And he had everything I used to wish for. A family stability, a home that felt permanent. Adrian's hand tightened on his fork. I didn't know Lucas. If I had, I swear I would have looked for you. Lucas gave a faint smile. You couldn't have known. It's weird, you know, seeing your face on someone else and realizing you missed 35 years with them. The kids warmed to Lucas fast. Era proudly showed him one of her drawings. You can keep it if you want, she said, her eyes bright. Lucas blinked, clearly caught off guard. Really? Thank you. He stared at it like it was something precious, something he hadn't expected to receive from anyone. After dessert, when the kids dashed off to the living room to build a Lego castle, I stepped onto the porch for a moment of quiet. The cool night air wrapped around me, and I let myself breathe, finally releasing tension I hadn't even realized. I was still holding. Adrian joined me a moment later, slipping an arm around my shoulders. For a while, we just stood there watching the kids through the window. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. I think so. Just surprised at how life works. Sometimes. One minute you think you know everything, then it turns upside down. He kissed the side of my head. Thank you for trusting me, for giving him a chance. I was scared, I admitted. I thought I was catching you cheating. Adrian winced. I'm sorry. I put you in that position. I should have told you the moment I knew. I rested my head on his shoulder. It doesn't matter now. We're here. He's here. That's what matters. When Lucas left later that night, he lingered by the door, almost reluctant to go. Thanks for letting me come, he said quietly. This means more than I can explain. Adrian clasped his shoulder. We're family, Lucas. That's not changing. Lucas's eyes glistened as he smiled.
Yeah.
Family. After he drove away, the house felt different. Not emptier, but somehow fuller, like it had stretched to make room for something new. That night, as I tucked AR in, she asked, Mom, does this mean we have two dads now? I laughed softly. No. Sweetheart. You just have one dad and an uncle who looks a lot like him. She grinned, satisfied, and curled under her blanket. Later, lying in bed beside Adrian, I thought about how fear had driven me to that cafe, certain I was about to see my marriage fall apart. Instead, I'd found something I didn't even know was missing. A whole other branch of family, waiting quietly in the background. Sometimes life takes things from you. Parents, security, trust. But sometimes when you least expect it, life gives something back. And maybe that's the lesson. Don't let fear write your story before the truth has a chance to speak. Sometimes we assume the worst, thinking betrayal is hiding around every corner. But the truth can surprise us not by breaking what we have, but by making it bigger than we ever imagined. Trust, even when shaken, can be rebuilt. And sometimes it can grow to include family we never knew existed.